Hi, I wanted to take this moment to provide you with an important update on the state of our city. Normally, I provide an update to residents in March or April of a given year, but as the pandemic began in the spring of this year, we felt so much was at risk of changing that it was best to delay the 2020 until there was more clarity. So, as we approached the end of the year, I thought it made sense to close the loop on our state of the city for 2020 and make sure that residents have a complete picture of where our city stands today. While this year is different, as the State of the City is being done in this format online, I hope it serves its purpose, and I know that next year we'll be back to the more traditional delivery in City Hall with residents and, of course, the City Council. So let's get started. To say the least, this has been a year like no other. We faced a mass shooting hate crime less than a year ago. Then we saw Trenton deliver to Jersey City the largest budget cuts to education in the history of the state. Then we saw a pandemic that hit Jersey City hard and early. Then we saw a budget gap for Jersey City explode to a $70 million shortfall. We've also seen an overdue conversation happening both nationally and locally around policing and racial injustice. We've seen lines at food pantries expand and the need for community services and support around our homeless population actually grow exponentially. And to round out the year, we're in the midst of a second wave of COVID-19. I think it's fair to say that 2020 has tested our city like no year has before. Yet I'm also proud to say that in each situation, we've not only met the challenge, but we've found ways to make our city more resilient and stronger for the future. I'm going to spend the next few moments of this update speaking to each of these challenges I just mentioned with regards to what we saw and the actions we took so that you as a resident can understand why I still remain so optimistic about our city. So let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about December 10th, 2019. For years, it seemed like a weekly newsreel about mass shootings somewhere in our country with tragic mass fatalities. Most people watch the news and for some reason think to themselves, it will never happen to us. But on December 10th, it did happen to us when two shooters entered a kosher grocery store and murdered several people after shooting and killing a police officer and another young man. Well, that was the most difficult day I've ever experienced as mayor. I take solace in the fact that our police officers and police leadership did an outstanding job in keeping a terrible situation from becoming much worse. How, you might ask? Well, first, active shooter training has been a big investment for our administration since I took office. This is one of those things that I felt was neglected. So in 2014, we hired some of the best police trainers in the country to work with our emergency services unit in the Jersey City Police Department, and we began to revamp all of our protocols on what we would do if we had an active shooter here in Jersey City. We've done scenario after scenario over the years with practice and more practice. And if you happen to follow my weekly Jersey City updates, I often spoke about this training and it being one of those investments we're making that I hope would never need to use. On December 10th, I was thankful that the City Council has supported me on this decision over the years and that we made the necessary commitments. We also made the investment over the years prior to December 10th in upgrading all of our Jersey City PD equipment, from outdated equipment from the 1970s to more state-of-the-art technology so that we can rest assured as a city, if we were ever in need, that we were prepared if any situation came about. On December 10th, our police chief, public safety director, and the men and women of the Jersey City Police Department put all that training to use and were nothing short of amazing. For me personally, it was about what happened in the hours after the shooting that I think is almost more emblematic of who we are as a city and for certain how I feel as both an American and a grandson of Holocaust survivors. What I did next was when other elected leaders were saying that we need to wait and investigate over the next few days the motives of the shooters, I was clear, vocal, and early with what I felt was your voice. I was the first to vocalize the actions on December 10th as a clear hate crime, and I called out other elected officials for not acknowledging this for what it was, a hate crime.
It was no question a hate crime, no question rooted in anti-Semitism. I think more and more information will prove out that point.
But after reviewing the CCTV cameras on the Jersey City side, we do feel comfortable that it was a targeted attack on the Jewish kosher deli across the street here.
As the mayor of the most diverse city in the country, we have no place for this, and I firmly believe the only way to push out hate is to not delay and call it out when you have the megaphone to do so. This started a conversation in our own city between different communities about where we can work more closely together and how we could bridge gaps that existed but weren't really acknowledged. Fast forward today, we have shared religious services at several holidays that didn't exist before, and we have more communication between communities than we've ever had in our city. So, as we got through that obstacle, and as we were healing from the mass shooting in December, it felt like we just rolled into the next crisis, which was Trenton politicians cutting our Jersey City education funding by the largest amount in the history of the state. We didn't have any time to waste here as well, and we worked closely with Superintendent Walker, and we took action here on two fronts. First, we implemented a Jersey City payroll tax on the city's largest corporation and dedicated all of that revenue towards the schools. This move alone will deliver close to $100 million in new money to our school system without affecting most residents. And then secondly, we set up regular meetings with the school leadership to find ways that the city can help alleviate some of the costs for the schools. Whether it's help with school garbage collection, we did that. Offloading the cost of school crossing guards, we did that. Helping the Board of Education with fuel costs, or improving the water system inside the schools. We look for ways that we can help. Well, the schools are an entirely separate branch of government with an entirely separate elected leadership that makes their decisions on their budget. I always believe that the city has a direct role here, and my philosophy has been that we're willing to help when there is a clear, targeted program where we can. I've been unwilling, though, to just write a check to a nebulous school budget that all too often residents don't have clarity around. But as I said earlier, I've been willing to help on specific school programs where residents can see where each dollar is going. But our commitment to education is beyond just dollars. It's making sure that students have a safe and positive environment to learn, and 2020 was a commitment on this front. Since we all know that Trenton has no money for their school development authority, that hasn't stopped us on the education front, and in 2020, we're doing something that no other urban area in the state of New Jersey is doing, which is actually finding ways to build new schools. Here in Jersey City, our administration has got creative. We've leveraged the private sector, and we've done so using our development so that we can continue to build new schools at no cost to the taxpayers. We've already approved 3 new public schools, and more are on the way. Why do I share this all on the schools front? Well, because it's another example of how a tough hand dealt our way on education is not going to stop us, and we'll instead figure out ways to overcome it. As if a mass shooting and school funding challenges weren't enough for us as a city, in March and April of this year, a new challenge arose as it brought about a global pandemic to which Jersey City was one of the earliest cities hit and one of the hardest cities hit in the Northeast. To date, we've had more than 7,000 cases and more than 500 fatalities. I think it's fair to say that at this point, everyone in our city knows a family that has lost someone from COVID. And as a broader community, we lost some of our best from this terrible virus. Let's just take a moment and reflect on a few of them. We lost Ward D Councilman Michael Yun. He was known for that trademark bow tie, but more importantly, his legacy as one as a dedicated community servant will live on long past him. I'm grateful for Councilman Yun's partnership in our shared efforts to make Jersey City a better place for all. May he rest in peace. We also lost Detective Ray Regalado. He had just retired after 25 years of service on the Jersey City Police Department. He was the chairman of the Latino Caucus of Hudson County, and he helped initiate the Dominican Independence Day celebration in Jersey City, another example of a tragic loss for our community. We also lost Jersey City International TV and Film Festival President Craig Golitz. He was a champion and mentor for many aspiring film artists with a reputation for helping the Jersey City community at large. We lost Craig, and that's another devastating loss. And then we also lost former Jersey City police officer and Ward F Councilwoman Viola Richardson. She was a fighter for her ward that she so passionately represented, and she was often regarded as a leader in the community with regards to engagement and outreach to residents. She's an example of another fighter for Jersey City gone way too soon. So it's been hard for me personally as well, like many of your families. Beyond losing many friends, this last summer I lost my grandmother to COVID, Elizabeth Fulop. I share that because it's been a tough year for all of us. But as hard as it has been for us, I also know that had it not been for some of the leadership that we work with in our HHS department, Health and Human Services, specifically the director Stacy Flanagan and her team, then the situation here in Jersey City would have been much worse. That's why we were recognized nationally as one of the 5 cities in the country to get the Critchie Foundation recognition for outstanding leadership in our COVID response. Here in Jersey City, we were the first in the state and one of the first in the entire country to implement any restrictions to protect our residents from the virus.
You were the first in the nation to impose social restrictions. So what made you act so quickly where other cities didn't?
Yeah, I mean, we were just following the news all over the world, and we realized that this could get really bad, and we figured that we wanted to be proactive. So we were very, very aggressive and the first to do that. And, it's good to see it happening more on a regional basis now, because I think that's the best way to see results.
I took action in March before anyone in New Jersey. And at the time, I was criticized by some businesses for overreacting. But I think the year has showed us that this was the right call at the time. We were also the first in New Jersey to set up our own municipal testing facilities for residents. We used our own funds and we contracted directly with the labs so that residents can have this resource immediately. And up to now, we've done more than 70,000 tests citywide on our residents.
Jersey's second largest city opened 2 testing sites this week. Jersey City Mayor Stephen Fulop says one site is a drive-through site and the other is a walk-up site, located on either side of the city.
We decided to do these sites because, truthfully, we were struggling with the number of testing that was happening in the state and Hudson County. And we felt that Jersey City needed to have its own testing sites.
We planned ahead also on the PPE front. And we as a city started actually stockpiling equipment in January when the first news began to break of the pandemic in China. And that's the reason why when others were scrambling for PPE, we in Jersey City were the first to implement a widespread PPE distribution to reopen businesses here in Jersey City. Our efforts didn't stop there. We raised millions of dollars from the private sector to support our local residents with relief programs. All of these steps have been good in fighting this pandemic, but I know we can't do it alone as a city government. We need you as a resident to help. That's why I felt it was so important for residents to have the same access to information that I do. And that's why we're one of the few municipalities to implement a detailed and transparent daily dashboard so that residents can see all of our COVID information in a clear and concise way. While our city's COVID response has been strong, with all that said, I still feel the sadness every single day of the personal losses that families have experienced this past year. That's why we'll be moving forward on a plan for 2021 with Friends of Skyway to redo this park next year, with the main feature being a memorial and 503 trees planted for each of the individuals that died due to the pandemic and were not allowed to have a formal funeral. Most of these Jersey City families were not only robbed of their life, but also due to COVID restrictions earlier in the year, were robbed of an opportunity where their loved ones could say goodbye. This pandemic has tested us, and we're far from through it. But I know we as a community are taking the steps that we need to in order to make sure that we limit hardship and allow proper healing. When I say hardship, it's not only losing a loved one this year that has created hardship for families, but this year hardship extended beyond that to the financial ruin that the pandemic has brought on so many. Our municipal budget is no different. We entered our city budget season with an unprecedented $70 million shortfall due to the lost revenue from no hotel parking revenue, no commercial parking lot tax revenue, limited construction permit revenue. I mean, the list goes on and on. The one positive here is that we were ahead of the curve as a city, and as a result of that, we were able to deliver no tax increase for our residents. In April, we as an administration could see where the budget was headed, and we started to take steps then which allowed us to navigate these times better than most. In April, I told our team that we had one objective for our city budget that we must achieve this year, which is that we would not add to the hardship that families are seeing by having a tax increase this year. Every day I hear about the struggles that residents are experiencing as they're out of work and have had meaningful loss of income. So we started to work at finding ways to cut and restructure our city budget so that we wouldn't be a contributing factor to the burden families are undergoing. Dollar by dollar, we made progress. While we had to make some real sacrifices, I was proud that in 2020, for the 5th time out of the 7 budgets I've been responsible for, we are presenting no tax increase on the municipal side to residents. Now, I know that your property tax bill is made up of several different components that different elected bodies control, from county government to school government. However, we made a commitment that on the piece we do control, which is the municipal part, that we would not have a tax increase, and I am proud that we were able to achieve that. Achieving no tax increase was a huge accomplishment for us this summer, but we really didn't have any time to reflect on it, as it was almost to the day that we completed our budget proposals to when the country witnessed on video the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer that then sparked an overdue conversation nationally and locally on police reform.
Today's the first rally and protest, and I'm out here with some of the council members because we want people in the community to understand that we hear them, we see them, we understand, and we're going to work with them to do better.
Here in Jersey City, we're no strangers to police reform, and we've been aggressive on this front since I took office in 2013. Over the years, I focused on creating a more diverse police department that better reflects the community we serve. And I've also focused on revamping the culture of the police department through a deliberate and positive community engagement program. The results have been significant as we've grown the police department and changed it from a majority Caucasian department to instead being a department that truly reflects the Jersey City diversity. And while we're doing all this, we're able to also drive down crime in Jersey City to historic lows, as 2019 tied the lowest homicide rate the city has seen in more than 30 years. But George Floyd opened our eyes to the fact that we as a city can and must do more, so we are. We were the first in New Jersey to take on President Obama's challenge over the summer and take a critical look at how we approach policing. We took steps then to formally revamp our use of force guidelines, which has been copied statewide. We implemented a disciplinary matrix so that residents can have more visibility around how officers are disciplined when violating the public trust. We instituted comprehensive de-escalation training for every single officer in the Jersey City Police Department so that they have better readiness to avoid a situation that can go in the wrong direction. We expanded technology in the JCPD so that residents and the city can have more access to video whenever police engage the public. We created a new quality of life task force here in Jersey City to better handle calls without a uniformed police officer when possible. And then finally, we changed entirely how our police have been deployed, so that there's absolutely always an emphasis on de-escalation. I share this with you because while some in the country went in the defund the police direction, here in Jersey City we didn't, because I know how fragile the progress is that we've made and the real implications of draconian cuts. That's why I actually pushed back on it and said that we can make reforms in our police department without jeopardizing public safety. And that's what we did. While many cities across the country are seeing increases in violent crime, here in Jersey City, we haven't seen that same trend, and it's largely due to the great work of the JCPD and the phenomenal partnership with the residents and our city. I do recognize, though, that trends in crime often correlate to hardship financially, as people are placed in desperate situations and then do desperate things. Without question, over the last few months, we've seen an astronomical increase in the need for safety net programs and mental health issues as people struggle with the ramifications of the pandemic. You just need to look at the food pantry lines or the calls to our health department to understand the magnitude of the issue here. There is a reason that places like New York City and Jersey City have been hit harder than most on this front. And that's because we're a blue-collar city and our history is a city of immigrants, and we still are. During times like a pandemic, it's often the immigrant community and the blue-collar working community that is the hardest hit. Why? Well, they're hit hard because they're frontline workers. They travel in public transportation. They often live with family members that have to physically go to work. That's why it's particularly important to support local resources and local food pantries like we're doing in Jersey City. In our city, these residents in need will not be forgotten. As an example, last week we helped open our 47th food pantry with the We Project, and it's already serving 350 families per week with a line that sadly starts at 5 a.m. when the food distribution is at 8 a.m. We've also emphasized as a city food access programs at large beyond food pantries. When the pandemic first happened, we immediately knew this would be a problem. We met internally to discuss plans for keeping vital services around food distribution working properly. And the first steps we took was our HHS department starting a COVID food insecurity program, which is a multi-division approach with seniors, veterans, and immigrant affairs, with the goal of making sure that no resident slips through the cracks on food. The program has delivered groceries and fresh produce. It's donated prepared meals from local restaurants. We give out meals ready to eat similar to what we provide in the military. We've given canned food directly to those economically impacted by COVID-19, and the list goes on. This program has delivered tens of thousands of meals since the start of the pandemic. We've also been active in creating a food system network to share information with families that need it. Sadly, in a related topic, we're also seeing an increase in the population among our homeless residents, and this is an area we're focused on as well. We partnered with the county government to get our homeless residents into vacant hotels during the pandemic, and we created a safe place for homeless residents to isolate that tested positive. We also expanded outreach and support services at our mobile hygiene centers so that the most vulnerable with the community have the best chance of getting through these difficult days. Looking forward, we're expanding the partnership with the county to provide more resources and more warming centers for our community that needs it, as I know and we all know that the winter's approaching. We didn't neglect the hardship that our businesses are undergoing and how they serve as the backbone of the local economy with employment. So we as an administration have raised millions of dollars from the private sector to launch one of the largest business relief programs of any municipality in New Jersey, and we've already distributed checks of $20,000 to close to 650 local businesses. Our focus has been businesses with less than 25 employees, as they are truly the backbone of our local economy. They're the laundromats. They're the nonprofits in our community. They're the restaurants in a community. They're the businesses that make a city a special place to live. Later this month, we'll also launch our local rent relief program, and which will be flexible in writing one-time checks of $1,500 to Jersey City families that need it. I know this isn't the absolute answer to ending these difficult times, but during the pandemic, we're all figuring it out from one month to the next on how to get by. And we're approaching this in a way with small, frequent steps and progress in order to make sure that we have the best chance of getting through this together. So I'll conclude this year-end update by emphasizing something that most people probably wouldn't expect me to say in 2020. The state of our city remains strong, despite unprecedented challenges. Whether it's policing, taxes, or social services, our city has met the challenge this year for sure. But the truly great thing about our state of the city is that we haven't spent the year being reactive at all. We continue to do the things to move a government forward. This year, we'll have paved more than 20 miles of Jersey City streets. We'll have implemented one of the largest protected bike lane systems in the entire region. We're doing $400 million in sewer improvements to mitigate flooding citywide. We'll have renovated more than 20 parks across the entire city. But it's also looking about beyond 2020 and laying the foundation for a great 2021 with some projects about to be undertaken. Whether it's completing the reservoir in the Heights, or building 3 new police precincts citywide, or redoing the Newark Avenue pedestrian plaza, or creating the country's first large-scale municipal vertical farming program. We clearly have some great projects about to start. And just think, these projects are in addition to some of the most significant transformational projects that are happening in the tri-state region, from SciTech City, next to Liberty Science Center, to Bayfront on the west side, to the municipal complex at Jackson Square, or the investment in the arts with the museum and the Lowe's about to happen at Journal Square finally. Most cities would hope for maybe one transformational project, but here in Jersey City, we're underway with 4 major projects that each will be $1 billion plus when completed. There is no question that our city's future remains bright. Over the last 7 years, we've truly transformed Jersey City into one of the best mid-sized cities in the country. I know there's much more work to do, but we as a community have taken an extremely difficult situation and actually turned it into a roadmap for progress. The state of our city remains strong. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.